Have you ever finished a painting and stood back and thought, something just feels missing? And although you've used the right colors and put the shapes in the correct places on the scene, something just overall feels flat about the piece. I imagine it's probably not your technique or even the material you're using, but it's something much simpler, something that most artists overlook. Today, we're going to take a look at gradients and values within a painting to make it realistic. Let's take a look. So this painting is one I recently painted as part of my Painting Realistic Seascape class at our local visual arts center. Not only did it provide a good place to start the class, but it also provides a great example as to why gradients and values are key to creating realistic art. It's probably good to go ahead and lay out some definitions for the words gradient and value within the art aspect. Gradation is a technique of gradually transitioning from one hue to another, or from one shade to another, or one texture to another, whereas value is an element of the art that refers to the lightness or darkness of colors or tones used in artwork. So why are gradients and values so important in creating realistic art? So here's our reference pulled up. As we take a look at the scene, we can see value shifts and gradient transitions on the horizon in the sky, both horizontally and vertically. In the clouds, there's transitions. On the actual water, there's transitions. And then if we actually zoom in a bit, all these wave structures will have transitions. The reflection on the water in front of the wave, moving over, this wave will have transition. The rocks will have transitions. Even the smaller waves down here will have transitions. As we look at this rock, we can see a light side, so the transition will come across like this. So as we can tell, zooming back out, the entire scene has gradients and value transitions. So it's vitally important if we're going to reconstruct this scene, we need to include these. In fact, we can even take it a step further and say all realistic art has these transitions, whether it be landscape, portrait, or still life. Transitions and gradients are important for creating realistic artwork. So let me give you some tips on how to better improve your gradient and values. Number one, find the light source. Gradients and values will start from whatever direction the light is coming. In this scene, the light source is quite evident, and so it's easy to determine our transitional flow. Now, if we zoom in, the wave areas are no different. They just follow the natural curvature. The top of the wave will be our lightest value, while the bottom, because it's not catching nearly as much light, will be darker. The concept holds true no matter the scene. In the case of this landscape, the light source isn't visible. However, if we look at where the highlights exist, it becomes evident how our transitions should flow. Tip number two, use grayscale. Taking the time to study your scene completely void of color will aid you in seeing these transitions. In fact, most artists will even keep a grayscale ruler, such as this one, near their work area to aid them in determining values. The example here has 10 values, but a smaller amount would be sufficient. Tip number three, avoid using black. And we'll use our landscape for this reference. The left end of our transition, also known as the shadow side, will be our darkest value. In order to create natural and realistic values, avoid using black. Instead, obtain the value by darkening and making the value cooler. Let me show you what I mean. I'll put up three sap green color swatches to represent three values of a tree. The first will be our highlight, the second a mid value, and finally the third our shadow. The most natural way to obtain a shadow is to use the color's complementary color. In this case, we'll use alizarin crimson. As you can see, adding it both cools and darkens the sap green, perfect for the shadow. On the opposite end, we can use lemon yellow to give us a nice highlight to represent where the sun and our lightest value is. I've got another bonus tip for everyone, but before I do, if you've enjoyed this video thus far, consider subscribing to the channel and make sure you click the bell notification so you're alerted when the new videos are released. Now, on to that bonus. Bonus tip, Roy G. Biv is your friend. The final tip pertains to gradient more so than value, and that is, gradients follow the color spectrum, especially when more than one color exists. If we look at our seascape sky, we can see the transition is vertical. At the horizon, our colors lean more to the left of the spectrum, but as we go up, so should we move right on the spectrum. This is a natural occurrence with skies, but also happens a lot with reflections. So if we're painting for natural realism, we should follow the color spectrum. So, to recap, gradients and value transitions are crucial to painting realism. If you've ever found your work flat or unnatural looking, recall our tips. Tip number one, find the light. In order to paint realistically, we must find our light source and follow the natural progression from highlight to shadow. Tip number two, use grayscale. A grayscale meter or completely removing the saturation or color from your work can help aid in finding the gradient and the values that you're looking for. Number three, avoid black at all costs. Using complementary colors to gain those shadows is a great way and natural way to develop shadows over time. And finally, our bonus. Remember our good old friend Roy. Using that spectrum and following the spectrum as it naturally progresses in skies or reflections is realistic and it should be painted as so. So, what do you think about these tips? Have I left any off the list? Let me know in the comments. And as always, until next time, happy painting.